Well, here we are. Here we are. Oh, here we go.
Why do you start it like a newscast? Well, here we are.
I've never done this before. I don't know what to tell you. Hello, my name is Eman.
I'm Liz.
I don't like that. Let's start over.
Me neither.
Hello, everyone. It's Eman and Liz here with ENL Talks podcast. And this is our first episode. So, as we promised, we are doing a Q&A with you guys. So I am going to go through a couple of the questions. But before we do that, I do just want to introduce myself a little bit more and also talk about Liz's background as well as my own background in entrepreneurship and how we're basically going to be running the podcast from here on out.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy we finally started doing this because we've been planning on doing this for, I think it's been, like 2 months?
We've been planning on doing it since we met, actually,
so, yeah.
but we didn't actually think to do the actual podcast until this year. So it was, I wonder what, I think it's because everything went to shit this year. We were like, you know what, let's do the podcast and actually spark some positivity while we do that. This is supposed to be a happy thing,
Yeah.
Bring joy into our lives.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time coming for sure. I think there's just been a lot of setbacks for us. Yeah. For everybody, I think, this year in general. Not this year, I'm sorry.
Not this year.
The past year.
2022, I think.
Yeah, and I'm excited for us to kind of start off this year with this. Yeah. I think this is something that we've both been kind of wanting to do for a while now.
Yeah.
We both kind of wanted to start a podcast that talked about, entrepreneurship, which is something that both of us are very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
We both, are very interested in business. Both of us are women. Both of us, have a vision for how we want to, the mark we want to leave on the world.
Like stamp our mark on the world.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, it's great to be able to kind of. It's great that we met each other when we did. I think that was something that we kind of clicked on immediately when we met, and we've already been friends for like 3 years now. Yeah,
it's been some time, but the types of conversations that we have, we don't stop talking. That's one of the reasons why we decided to do the podcast. Is because we talk a lot. We're both people who really like to dig deep into certain subjects and. Also like to think of different ways of viewing the world. That's one of the biggest things that we always look at. So when we're talking about entrepreneurship and whatnot, I think since we're so young and we started at such a young age as well, I think having each other on this journey as well as bringing other people on this journey allows us to kind of feel a lot more comfortable within that and not really be afraid of doing the things that we want to do and being afraid to show ourselves to the world that we want to.
I did want to kind of start this podcast off with us just kind of talking about a little Q&A in terms of just having questions that both you guys asked us on our Instagram, as well as just some questions we kind of wanted to just go ahead and answer right away, just so it's clear of who we are and what we do and why we're doing this. I think kind of the first question that I think would be great for us to answer would be, why did we start doing this podcast?
Yeah, so and again, it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. We started to do this podcast mostly because we talk a lot about, the types of things that you don't really hear most people talking about. And sometimes she and I just think to each other, we're like, just imagine getting this on video and having the world hear it.
Speaking for myself, I've always wanted to, I guess have a podcast and have a community I can go to and kind of discuss things with them, because talking about entrepreneurship, me and Eman, we're not yet established in this field of business ownership. We are, like I said, both of us are very interested in that. We're very passionate and ambitious people, I think, and we're relatively young still, so I think there's still a lot for us to learn, a lot of space for us to grow.
Absolutely.
In this regard, right? That's why I think it'd be great for us to not only just kind of capture and record, I guess, in almost in real
Document,
time.
you know what I mean? Document our journeys, basically.
Yeah, in real time, right?
Yeah.
And that'd be great. And I think just also maybe, you know, in the future we could have some guests over, have some people over that also are maybe even more experienced than us, and that would be great. We could learn from them, and in turn, a lot of you guys can learn from them as well. And I think that'd be a pretty good opportunity, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I think also with Liz and I, you know, both of our networks combined, I think it does allow for us to reach out to those type of people and actually bring in the kind of knowledge that not only that we want to also kind of like brainstorm in the sense, you know, different approaches and whatnot, because, you know, somebody could be very successful in a very specific niche, and you could be wanting to go, let's just say, within that category as well, but maybe you want to do something different. So let's just say a clothing brand, for example. You know a person who's a millionaire or who's wildly successful in the clothing industry, but mostly in the males section, but you want to do a women's clothing brand. You see what I mean? So of course they'll be able to give you tips and whatnot on how to relatively be successful, but at the same time, you know, that knowledge doesn't really tend to mean anything until you actually try it for yourself, and you try it within that niche that you're wanting to go to, or you find someone in that exact same category who could, you know, actually bring that information to you. But I think, you know, for me personally, like I've like with my journey in entrepreneurship, I've networked a lot. I have come across amazing people within so many different industries, and I know you have too. And we both learned so much from them, which is one of the reasons why we also want to start this podcast, is because not only are we wanting to gather more information and share it with you guys, but we also want to share the information that we already have too, and the things that have worked for us within our business ventures. But like you said, you know, we're not completely established yet, but we have our own experiences, we have our own history with failing and succeeding in different areas, and I think, you know, at least if we share that and we document not just our success but also our failures and our struggles and our resilience to that as well, I think that's really where it brings, you know, something meaningful, you know what I mean? Something that doesn't just make it worth listening to, but also something that positively impacts other entrepreneurs that are going down the same road. Next question. Okay, so one of our viewers said, how did you both start out as entrepreneurs? Is it more difficult for women?
I think, speaking for myself, when did I start entrepreneurship? I think
started like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but I think in terms of making a lot of headway, if I'm being honest, this is kind of the first thing I learned about this whole thing is entrepreneurship. In my personal experience, when it comes to business ownership and stuff like that, it's not, at the very least, at the very beginning, the first couple of years of you owning a business, it's not really so much as a side hustle. It's more a lifestyle at that point at the beginning, right? Because you have to put in a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of laser focus into your mission, into your goals. And if you're not laser focused in the very beginning, it's very difficult to kind of even make any headway. You know what I mean? I just feel like the first year, the first 2 years are the most crucial. I think moving forward,
I'd say even like the first 6 months.
Yeah,
because you can make a lot.
Depending on how much work you put into it originally, right? I think I would argue and say a year, give or take a year.
Give or take.
6 months to a year to 2 years, somewhere there. But I feel like, so for me, I feel like I started kind of in graphic design or like logo design, branding, stuff like that. That's kind of generally where I started. And I kind of picked it up, I dropped it, I picked it up, I dropped it, and that's just what it is. Like, I feel like for me, at the time especially, you know, I've always been working, I've always been in school, so kind of having another thing and starting another thing, to me, it was difficult, and I'm not saying that this would be the same for everybody. In Eman's case, she's
completely different.
Her experience is completely different. She's very much. I think both of us are relatively ambitious on the same level, but I think in terms of
we started differently. We have our own ways of doing it.
Yes, but I will say this, I think in terms of discipline, you're a lot more disciplined when it comes to, honestly, that's just how I see it. You are very inspirational in that regard,
Oh my
because
God.
I think I dream big.
You're gonna make me blush.
Well, good, because it's true. Because I feel like in your case, you're you're very ambitious, yes, but you're also very, very disciplined in terms of, I want this and I envision myself in this, place in my life in 6 months, and you get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is, or even if it takes you a bit longer, but at the very least, you're a lot closer to your goal in 6 months than, like me, I aim for 10 years. So like in 10 years, I'll be over there. But
no, but at the end of the day, like especially like with your journey, with what I know, being your friend, sticking by all these years. Well, you told me anyway. I think, especially seeing how you've changed like over the years, like when you first started with your journey onto entrepreneurship, you got really, like I could tell that you were one of those people who just love to learn.
Yeah.
You're one of those people who get so fascinated by all these different things that the world has to offer, that you're like, oh my God, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but it does become an issue when it's like, you know what I mean?
There's definitely pros and cons.
Exactly, there's pros and cons to it, but that's the one thing that I loved about you, was the fact that you were so open-minded, you were so curious. You know what I mean? Like you don't find much of that energy nowadays, because people are very, what was the word? It's conditioned. So people are very conditioned. Most people are conditioned to believe that as long as they go to school and get a job, they'll be happy, they can start a family, have kids, just like work until they can retire, and then that's it. And you know what, that works for some people. I know some people who actually want this. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's all it all depends on what you look for. But as somebody like yourself who looks at the world, and you look at it with with curiosity, and you look at it with ambition to achieve those things, and to try those things, and to see what you like and what you don't, type of thing. Like I think that's a very powerful trait that you have, because it's very rare, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's...
No, it is very rare. Don't be modest.
I wasn't right. Yes, it's amazing. I know. No, yeah, but I think that's kind of the gist of where I started. In my case, it was, like I said, mostly design, art, graphic design. I think that's mostly where I kind of started. In your case?
So in my case, it was actually COVID.
I started with COVID.
No, I swear to God, it was COVID.
Guys, it didn't start in China. It started in the man's basement.
Yeah, basically. So, with COVID, because I was meant to actually, travel to Egypt. I'm half Egyptian, so, my family's in Egypt. I did want to go see them the summer of 2020. And, obviously airports closed, and I wasn't able to leave the country. And, at the same time, I wasn't able to find any work. So I was kind of forced into that, kind of state of mind where I had to find a way to make money, because like I wasn't really willing, like I didn't even enroll myself into spring or summer classes. I had nothing. I was bored. But I was bored to the point where I was like I'm not making any money, I'm not gaining any education. Like I was, what do I do with myself? You know what I mean? Like it was that kind of state of mind where I was like, I can't sit like this for 4 months until September. Like it just got to the point where I was actually so frustrated with myself that I started to research things online, and I started learning drop shipping. That was one of the first businesses that I did start, was actually drop shipping and e-commerce. So I got into that, and then shortly after that I got really into crypto, trading stocks like here and there. It wasn't too serious, but I really got into crypto for a little bit, but then it kind of just, ever since I started with drop shipping and e-commerce, I remember taking a course at the time, and I don't think that course is active anymore, otherwise I would share it. I don't want to gatekeep or anything, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not active anymore. But at the time that it was, they were talking, they didn't teach you drop shipping right away. From what I remember, they conditioned you mentally before.
That sounds like a cult.
I know it sounds like a cult, but listen.
They condition you mentally.
But
they sit you in a room.
I know, but it's not that bad. Listen, so instead of just showing you what drop shipping is and kind of just give you the ABCDs and expect you to do it, basically how they taught you was, before they even mentioned anything about drop shipping, they wanted you to learn how to open your mind. to more to education and be willing to change. So there's something that I learned at the time that has been following me around for years, and it still pops in my brain today, but we call it the teachability index. Okay, so it's your
I've heard of that.
Exactly. So it's your willingness to learn times your willingness to change. So it's usually on a scale of like 1 to 100, and let's just say your teachability index, like your willingness to change is from 1 to 10. How would you rate yourself? Multiply that by your willingness to actually change and take action. It's on a scale from 1 to 10 as well. So basically where you land on a 1 to 100 scale, that basically defines how teachable are you. And ever since I learned that, it's just been something that I carried with me up until now, and it's been years later. It's been 3 years since,
Well, I mean,
so
the teachability index is something that changes. You can't.
It does change. Absolutely,
it's not built into.
Exactly,
right?
but that's the thing. So, but learning that, because you tend to meet people along the way who, they agree with you at first. They might say that they want to do all these different things, but the thing is, in order to be successful in a certain department, you need to be the person who's able to be successful in that department. But in a sense, you need to be, your character and your way of thinking needs to match that kind of success, if that makes sense. So if you're not a teacher, like if you're the type of person that's not teachable, how do you expect to learn anything, let alone apply it? You see what I mean? So that's pretty much like the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I didn't really start to have since the question asked, is it more difficult for women? For me personally, over time, it has been something where entrepreneurship for me as a woman has felt very, what was the word? It's almost like, I almost have to work twice as hard, if that makes sense. I felt like I wasn't getting taken seriously, like when I first started my drop shipping stores and whatnot. And this has started from the beginning up until now. I always have, there's always, men in my DMs talking to me about, like maybe you should just stop this, go back to school, or go do this, go do that. And it's like, first of all, okay, I graduated university, thank you very much.
Do you think there's a lot of, I guess, male entrepreneurs who tend to kind of come to you with unsolicited advice, like here's how you should be doing this?
100%. So there has been times where I would meet male entrepreneurs who would criticize me in a way that's not exactly necessary. So in the sense where I should keep my voice down, I should kind of like keep to myself a little bit more, like basically the opposite of what I actually need to do as an entrepreneur to get myself out there. So
there's definitely I'm not going to say a limit, because it's not a limit. It's a different way in which we have to act to be able to get to where we need to be.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So there's definitely certain areas in terms of entrepreneurship that we can't really enter. I'm talking about even alcohol or
OnlyFans.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like we're not what's the word? We're not, like, those are fields that not only are we not interested in, we're not interested in that, but also it's fields that kind of go directly against our basic principles and beliefs.
Exactly.
Not just religious, but also personal.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of another thing where we also have to limit how we present ourselves to people online, how we present ourselves to people in person, how we interact with both men and women, all these things that we have to consider.
You know what I mean? You're not just proving now that you can do it. You're also proving that you did it yourself, and that the assumptions are not true. Because at the end of the day, obviously this is something that we want to change in this society, but of course, Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think personally, like as women, it's almost like you just gotta take the extra steps to really show that you actually know yourself. You know what I mean? And do it in a way that, at the end of the day, you achieve your goals and you do it with dignity, and you do it in a way where you are very proud of yourself. So, because obviously we're not shaming here.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Anyways, let's move to the next question.
Next question.
What kind of topics are we going to be discussing? We are not just documenting our success and our progress in entrepreneurship, but we are also talking about, education. We're talking about lifestyle choices. We're talking about, the way that you think about yourself, self-development and so forth, and the people that you surround yourself with. Like, the list can go on. The type of topics that we will be discussing are so broad, but they all lead to the same thing, which is to be honest, just success in entrepreneurship. Because the thing is, to be successful in entrepreneurship and to be successful in general, you need to be willing to make sacrifices to achieve the things that you want to achieve, but you need to be doing it in a way where you're not sacrificing yourself.
You
can't sacrifice yourself.
Yeah, before you said that, I was going to say sacrifice just sound like a very scary word.
It's don't get me wrong, like, it is a scary word, because at the end of the day, like, nobody wants to think that they have to give something up for something else.
Exactly.
Especially when it has to do with, family or friends or...
Yeah, it should never be at the
mean?
cost of your... I keep using the word values, but your values.
No, you should never sacrifice yourself and your morals for success and money.
No,
like
definitely.
that's something that Liz and I hold very very closely, because it's one of those things where we live in a type of society now where people are willing to risk their souls and they're willing to risk their lives and whatnot for money. And it's not, like I said, this is not a judgmental space. We're here to talk, we're here to discuss. But for Liz and I, that is simply just not something that we are okay with at all. So we don't entertain that.
No, I agree absolutely. Yeah, and that question of, I guess, what topics we're going to be discussing. I mean, that is something that will continuously evolve. I think we're just going to keep coming up with new topics. We had a whole list of topics that we kind of naturally came across, but I think one of the things that I would love for us to talk about right now is actually something that we talked about, I believe it was yesterday, I think.
Oh,
So basically, long story short, there was a time at some point when we were talking about this podcast and shooting our first episode, and I was losing my mind, stressing out. I was really, really stressing out about this whole endeavor, because I mean, it's something that we've never done before.
Of course.
Neither of us. I mean, I'm in particularly, I feel like I'm relatively private. I don't really even post on my personal Instagram, and it is something that I'm trying to get a little bit out of. Right, I'm trying to be a bit more public, in the best way, of course, and to be a bit more okay with kind of showing some small portion of my life to people. Obviously, not the whole thing, but some part of my life. I think that would be just beneficial to me and my future businesses and etc. But something that we talked about, and I expressed my worries to you, my stresses, and was basically telling you how, it is stressful, because for me, I kind of am a perfectionist, and this is something that I will say, perfectionism. I'm telling you this right now. If you're starting a business, let me tell you this right now, okay? Perfectionism is stopping your growth. 100%, 1,000,000%. I don't care who comes for me. Perfectionism is ruining your growth.
Of course.
It's ruining your ability to it's essentially the biggest thing that's gatekeeping you from getting where you want to be, where you need to be. Because you will, not only is it that you will never be perfect, no matter how, and this is something you told me, and I was kind of processing it afterwards. When I was driving back, I was like, she right. But I'm just kind of like sitting there, and I'm like...
We had like a mini rant session, like you're telling me about, your stresses, and I'm just going off at you, and I'm like, no.
You were absolutely correct, you're absolutely right, but it was like, it was just something where, it was a lot of what ifs. I was talking to you about well, what if this? Well, what if that? Well, what if this? You know what I mean? So I was stressing out a lot about that, and because I am, like I said, I'm by nature very much a perfectionist when it comes to artistic things, right?
Of course.
So I've always been into art. I've always been into. I started off with I guess more physical art, right? So like. It sounds weird, but you know what I mean, like literal art,
like drawing,
like actual,
painting,
not
like
online,
sculptures.
not digital, but things that I use or things that I would create with my own hands, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that also means that there was so many sketches, so many pieces of art that I've created that nobody has ever seen them, simply because there was that one little thing I just couldn't get perfect. And it got to the point of where literally there was only a handful of pieces, sketches, whatever it is, that I felt okay with showing people. I literally had a few pages, the beginning few pages of my sketchbook, that I would show people. Oh, you draw? Can I see? And I'm like, okay, here are the first few pages you can actually see. The remainder of my sketchbook was just not for anybody to see because it's not perfect, right? And that's a problem when it comes to...
Do you still have them?
I do, yeah. I can show them to you now.
You can, but I mean, like, that could be another business idea here. Who knows?
But you know what I mean? And this is something I was thinking about, and I was thinking about just how many other people there are that must feel this way, who want to start a podcast, who want to start whatever, whatever it is
any
you want to
kind
start,
of business, whatever it may be.
Whatever you want to do, and they don't because they're so concerned with it not being, not even necessarily perfect, but just not
presentable.
Yeah,
or
I feel like for me it was more so a thing of, if I want to do something, I want to do it right? And that's why for me, I need to have a camera, I need to have a mic, I need to have this, I need to have that.
But how do you know how to do it right when you've never done it before? You see what I mean? So
yeah, and that's something you told me yesterday. That was like, she's actually, that's actually correct. So that's something that I thought I would bring up here, because this is like a small little piece of advice.
So when it comes to being a perfectionist, you see what I mean? Like, where, like you said, it stops you from trying new things. It stops you from growing. It stops you from showing the world what you have to offer. Yeah, and I mean, you have to make mistakes. This is another thing you brought up. I feel like you forgot what you were talking about. You're just like, what did I say? No, I'm enjoying this. You're repeating everything back to me. That means you listened to me.
Of course I did.
Thank you.
No, I did. Did you notice? I just shut up the whole time.
No, I didn't.
I just wouldn't say anything because I'm like, you know what? I'm just recording everything you're saying. But you did mention the whole thing with. You have to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And I mean, there's little studies of people. I can't obviously name a specific study because I don't remember, but there are studies and there has been research done that literally shows that students, let's say, who make mistakes during tests or whatever, it not only accelerates your learning, you'll learn that much quicker, but also at that point you're able to then go on and teach other people. You know what I mean? Being like, well, hey, look, I made this mistake, right? Like it solidifies all this information in your brain so much more than just being perfect this whole time.
Well, because at the end of the day, like being perfect, it just doesn't exist. Like we live in a world that's full of flaws. You know what I mean? We're human beings, we're all flawed.